When we talk about war, most people picture front lines, generals, and decisive battles. But if you really want to understand how societies collapse or survive, you don't start with armies. You start in kitchens, workshops, streets, and local councils. Because when war reached the home front, it was never bombs or bullets that broke daily life first. It was systems people assumed were permanent. That false sense of permanence is what this channel exists to challenge. On Iron Age instincts, we strip history down to its pressure points, and today we're looking at what consistently failed first when war entered civilian space, and why that knowledge still matters if you care about resilience, preparedness, and historical truth. Stay with me through this opening, because what I'm about to lay out explains why entire populations unraveled long before cities burned. The lesson is uncomfortable, especially for modern societies that trust complex systems without question. Across conflicts from ancient sieges to 20th-century total war, the pattern is brutally consistent. The first things to break were not physical structures, but invisible agreements. Trust in supply, trust in authority, and trust in neighbours. Once those cracked, everything else followed. Understanding this gives you more than historical insight. It gives you a framework for reading instability in your own time and for avoiding the mistakes civilians made again and again under pressure. When supply chains failed before violence ever arrived, the earliest and most reliable point of failure on the home front was food distribution. Long before shells fell, access to calories became unpredictable. In ancient cities under threat, farmers simply stopped bringing surplus to market. In early modern wars, merchants hoarded goods, waiting for price spikes. In the 20th century, centralized rationing systems lagged behind reality. Civilians didn't starve immediately, but they felt uncertainty first. And, well, uncertainty changed behavior fast. People shifted from daily buying to stockpiling, from cooperation to competition. The lesson here is practical. Any society dependent on just-in-time delivery is fragile under stress. Historically, households that survived the longest maintained redundancy-stored grains, preserved foods, and local exchange networks. Applied today, the principle is simple. Dependence on a single supply source is a vulnerability, not efficiency. When currency and wages lost meaning faster than morale, money was often the second system to break. War economies distort value rapidly. Prices rise before wages adjust, and savings evaporate through inflation or confiscation. Roman civilians during prolonged campaigns, European towns during religious wars, and urban populations during both world wars all experienced the same shock. Money no longer guaranteed food or safety. Barter returned not as a romantic fallback, but as a necessity. Skills, tools, and relationships replaced coin. For modern viewers, this is not abstract. The actionable lesson is diversification. Historically resilient households held tangible assets, practical skills, and tradable goods. Currency works until it doesn't. History shows that when it fails, adaptability matters more than wealth. When governance broke at the local level before national collapse, another critical failure point was local authority. Long before empires fell, town councils stopped enforcing rules evenly. Corruption increased, favours replaced law, and enforcement became selective. This wasn't always malicious, it was often survival. Officials prioritised their families and allies when resources ran thin. Civilians quickly learned that official promises meant less than personal connections. The practical takeaway is uncomfortable but necessary. In crisis, decentralized trust networks outperform formal structures. Historically, neighborhoods that organized mutual defense, food sharing, and information exchange survived better than those waiting for orders from above. Applied knowledge means knowing your community, not just your government. When social trust fractured under sustained stress. Perhaps the most damaging collapse was social cohesion. Scarcity breeds suspicion. During sieges, blackouts and evacuations, neighbors turned into competitors. Rumors spread faster than facts, and fear filled the gaps. Minority groups were scapegoated. Hoarders were attacked. Violence became localized and personal. This wasn't inevitable, but it was common. The societies that resisted this breakdown shared two traits: clear norms and shared hardship. When everyone knew the rules and believed suffering was distributed fairly, trust held longer. The lesson for survivalists and historians alike is clear. Social capital is a resource. It must be built before crisis, not during it. When infrastructure failed quietly rather than catastrophically. Contrary to popular belief, power grids, water systems and transport didn't usually collapse in dramatic moments. They degraded. Repairs were delayed, maintenance was skipped, trains ran less often, water pressure dropped and blackouts became routine. Civilians adapted gradually until the system was no longer reliable. Historically, households that adjusted early by reducing dependence on centralized infrastructure fared better. Wells, manual tools, and alternative heating weren't luxuries. They were lifelines. Applied today, redundancy and simplicity outperform technological dependence under stress. When psychological endurance broke last, but mattered most, the final failure was internal. People can endure hunger, cold and danger longer than expected. What breaks them is uncertainty without meaning. When civilians no longer understood why they were suffering or how long it would last, morale collapsed. History shows that information, even bad news, stabilizes populations better than silence. Those who maintained routine, purpose and narrative survived with less long-term damage. The practical application is mental discipline. Resilience is not optimism, it's clarity. This is why studying the home front matters. War doesn't begin with explosions. It begins when systems people trust stop working as promised. If this breakdown feels familiar, that's not coincidence. History doesn't repeat, but pressure exposes the same weaknesses every time. If this kind of analysis is why you're here, make sure you subscribe to Iron Age Instincts. Share this with someone who studies history seriously and keep sharpening the instincts that civilizations forget at their own risk.